Years ago, Skechers made a splash with the Razor 3 under the Skechers Performance sub-brand. And now the Razor is back with a new foam and under a new flag. This is the Skechers Running Aero Razor, and it's time to take it for a run. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kofuzi and I'm a non-elite runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I want to talk to you guys about the Skechers Running Aero Razor. But before I give you my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that was sent to me by Skechers for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's gonna get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Skechers Running Aero Razor, and let's start with the spec. This is a 36mm stack height shoe with a 4mm drop, giving us 32 millimeters of stack height in the forefoot. Now in this shoe, we've got Hyper Burst Pro, not to be confused with Hyper Boost Pro. This is Hyper Burst Pro. And what makes it pro is that it's made out of aliphatic TPU, my favorite of the thermoplastic polyurethanes. Now the unusual thing about this shoe when you pick it up is that I don't know if this is a coating or something that's been kind of compression molded into the foam, but the entire midsole foam looks like it's kind of wrapped in some sort of a braided jacket. It reminds me of like the jacket that's around a rope if you've ever been rock climbing. It kind of has that kind of feel to it, but it's also on the bottom of the shoe too. But it's a very unusual pattern that I've only seen in a couple of other brands' shoes. Now, there's more than just the aliphatic TPU that's in this midsole. There's also a nylon H-wing that's in the forefoot of the shoe. It pretty much looks like a very thin H that exists in the forefoot of the shoe, kind of like two thin strips of material that go along kind of the edges of the pads of your foot with a cross member that connects the two pieces. But that's their take on a carbon fiber plate in a shoe. Rather than using the full plate, they're going with something much more minimal. And it's also nylon and not carbon fiber, so it's going to be very flexible. And that tells me that's probably in there more for stabilizing the foams and keeping them from getting too squishy rather than from trying to make the shoe extra springy. Now there is a very early rocker on this shoe as well. And what I mean by early rocker is that as we're talking about the back of the shoe and going to the front, the point where the shoe starts curling up to the sky, if it starts further back in the shoe, that's what I call early. And then there's also an aggressive toe spring here, so it's curling up quite a bit. So there is a lot of tapering that's happening as you go from the beginning of the rocker and into the toes. And that usually tells me that a shoe is intended to be more of a midfoot striker shoe. Now, protecting all of this midsole foam is Goodyear rubber. That's the co-branded rubber material that Skechers has been using for a long time in their performance run product. And there is a lot of it here in the forefoot and two skids protecting each side of the heel with some exposed foam and cutouts in the middle. Up top, we have a very thin engineered mesh that is strong and breathable. It looks and feels like it's designed for performance. There's a very thin tongue with a bit of padding in it, but nothing that I would consider puffy. And there is a very restrained amount of padding throughout the heel collar and to the heel cup. As far as fit goes on the shoe, I went with my regular running shoe size, and that worked out very well for me. I'd say if you have experience with the old Razor 3 or the 3 Plus, those shoes from years ago, I'd say that the fit on this is a little bit more snug than it was on the old Razors. Those shoes felt a lot wider in the forefoot and it felt a lot more voluminous in the toe box. Overall, it felt like there was a lot more volume in that shoe. This one I feel like corrects that a little bit. I felt like those shoes were a little bit bigger than they needed to be. I feel like this shoe fits just right for a shoe that's meant to be running a little bit faster. So there is some snugness there. And overall, when it comes to weight on the shoe, they've managed to keep this shoe extremely lightweight for a shoe in this class, weighing in at a measured weight of 7 ounces or 198 grams. Now that we talked about what the shoe is like on paper, let's talk about what it's like on the road. The Skechers Running Aero Razor is a worthy update to a shoe that was well loved by the running community. And I think it's important to note that this shoe isn't just a re-release of the old Razor 3 in a new package. This is an update and a significant upgrade. Not only does the shoe fit differently than the original, and I think in a way that is an improvement, the switch to a different foam in the midsole I think was a big risk for Skechers here, and I think that risk really pays off. I love what they've done with the ATPU in this shoe. Now, keep in mind that not all ATPUs are exactly the same. Like there's, in my mind, like daily training ATPUs, and then there's racing ATPUs like we've seen in like the ASICS Megaspeed Ray, the Puma Fast R3. And so there's kind of differences, and there are scales depending on kind of the way that the ATPU is formulated and fabricated. And I'd say that the ATPU in the Aero Razor feels more like daily training ATPU, but to me, that still is a really nice thing. I've used this shoe for a variety of use cases, from a long run with some up-tempo miles in it, to a speedier fartlek with some threshold efforts thrown in, and also on some recovery paces in between. So I've used it on a wide range of paces, and it's pretty comfortable at pretty much everything. Now, I wouldn't be reaching for this shoe on a recovery run kind of day, and I'm not sure that I would really even use this shoe for a daily training kind of day, just regular easy miles. But I think for a lot of people who need to get a lot of different uses out of their shoes, this can be a really great option that you can use for your daily training runs, and you could use for some pretty tough workouts as well. Whether those workouts are really fast or really long, I think the ATPU is kind of malleable enough, or enough of a chameleon, that it could rise to the occasion, even under a lot of very different kind of running scenarios. The sensation that I get from this shoe is that it is a little bit more firm than I would expect to see in a racing application of ATPU, but there is a nice sense of cushion to the shoe. It's not going to be mushy soft like a recovery run shoe, but it is absorbing shock like you would want to happen for a shoe that you're going to be running faster on the roads in. And the shoe is also reasonably responsive as well. After the shoe compresses, there's a nice pushback that the shoe gives. Now, it's not the most explosive of foams, and again, that's consistent with this being more like daily trainer caliber ATPU rather than race caliber ATPU, but it is still really nice for a wide variety of pace ranges that you're going to be able to take this shoe on. Now, there is that nylon H wing that's in this shoe, and let me tell you, as someone that is pretty sensitive in terms of what's in the shoe, I really can't feel the H plate in this shoe at all. I'm not really noticing what it's doing. So if you're worried that like, oh, I really wanted to have something that's speedy, versatile, and has no plate in it, I wouldn't necessarily exclude the Aero Razor from your consideration, because to me, it just feels like there's a really good foam underfoot, and they've done a really good job of shaping it so that way it has that versatility at a wide spectrum of pace ranges. I did mention that I think this is ideally suited for midfoot strikers, and I do think that that's pretty much the way that this rocker is set up along with the toe spring. There is an aggressive amount of taper at the forefoot because of that high toe spring, but for me, even as a forefoot striker, I'm still feeling like there's a lot of foam in the forefoot of the shoe, and I think that's again one of the positive aspects of using ATPU, is that you could get a lot of foam feeling without using quite as much if you were using other materials. And so I still feel like for forefoot strikers as well, this is a shoe that's going to suit you very nicely. Now let's wrap up this video by going over the buying guide, and we'll also discuss some alternatives. The Skechers Running Aero Razor is a fun and fast tempo shoe that I think is going to be great for speedy long runs and for a lot of your workouts as well. And for people who are looking for a racing shoe that doesn't have a lot of carbon in it, I think the Aero Razor is going to make for a really nice option. And the shoe comes in at a retail price of $140, which I think is a phenomenally good price for what you're getting in this shoe. If even that is too much for you, and I do recognize that $140 is a lot of money, yeah, there is the GoRun Razor 5, which is the prior version of this shoe. I've not tested it, so I can't personally vouch for the experience there. The $140 for the Aero Razor is a really good deal, and I think that it's probably one of the best values in running in 2026. ASICS. Now, before we talk about some alternatives on the market to the Aero Razor, I do want to talk about one other shoe as a potential alternative that you might want to look at from Skechers, and this is the Aero Spark. Now, this is a shoe that to me wasn't that confusing when it first came out, but now that the Aero Razor exists, I'm really not sure why the Aero Spark exists, because both of these shoes are intended to be the same type of shoe. They're both intended to be used for your speedy workout days. They're doing it with some very different materials. The Aero Spark uses Hyper Burst ice, and it feels like some of those older Nitro foams that you guys might remember from years ago. So it's a speedy material that kind of gets more responsive the faster you run in it. And I do think that the Aero Spark is a really good shoe, but it's several ounces heavier. It's over 9 ounces for my reference, US men's size 9, and it has a very retro kind of feel to it, a version of speed that is no longer all that much in favor in 2026. So while the shoe is good, it's a little confusing to me why Skechers Running decided to release both of these shoes, especially because they also have very similar prices. The Aero Spark comes in at $135, so there's not a really compelling reason at just $5 cheaper to go with the Aero Spark when the Aero Razor exists. The only thing that I can maybe think about in terms of why these two shoes exist is, I think with the difference in the toe spring and the difference in drop, 6mm versus 4 in the Aero Spark, is that maybe that's the one that's a little bit more geared towards heel strikers versus midfoot and forefoot strikers in their Aero Razor. But that seems unsatisfactory as a possible explanation in my mind, because I just don't think that the Skechers Running lineup is wide enough to really have two different tempo shoes in the lineup at the same time. It just doesn't make sense to me why that other one exists. So for pretty much anyone looking at the Aero Spark, I'm going to say get the Aero Razor instead. If you're going to be picking up a shoe from Skechers, you'll be much happier. Now let's take a look at what the rest of the market has to offer. And I'm going to give you two alternatives that are both all ATPU shoes, but those two shoes are very different, even though they're using at least nominally the same foam. The first shoe that I want to take a look at comes from Puma, and this is the Velocity Nitro 4. This is a shoe that is using all ATPU in the midsole foam, but it has a 10mm drop and a lot of padding in the heel cup. So this is more of kind of like a Pegasus formula, or even kind of like a Ghost type formula in terms of the way that this shoe is set up. But I think the ATPU does a lot of heavy lifting in this shoe, metaphorically speaking, in terms of making this a very fun and peppy shoe to be able to run in. Yes, you do notice the 10mm drop, but I feel like when you're looking at higher drop shoes, they typically don't have very aggressive rockers or aggressive toe springs. So I think for a lot of people, you're really just gonna have to put it on and see how it feels when you're actually moving around in the shoe to see if that 10mm drop is going to be as big a problem as you might think. Now, the ATPU that's in the Velocity Nitro form is much more dense, probably the most dense formulation of ATPU that I've experienced, I think, ever. But it is really nice and responsive when you do want to pick up the pace. So there's some pace versatility to the shoe. You can take this shoe for some workouts. And overall, I think it just goes to show that the way you would decide between a Velocity Nitro 4 and a Skechers Aero Razor is not based on which is quote unquote better, but based on what kind of shoe you need. Do you need a kind of a daily training everyday shoe? Then I'd say go with the Velocity Nitro 4, which also is at the same price of $140. But if you want something that's intended for speedy workouts, the Velocity Nitro 4 could do the job sometimes, but I think that the faster the job or the longer the run, I'd rather go with the Aero Razor. Now, I think the shoe comparison that I think is the most interesting is going to come from ASICS, and this is the Megablast. This was one of my favorite shoes of 2025, and into 2026, it's still one of my favorite shoes. And this is another shoe that's using all aliphatic TPU, and it's using it in that daily training ATPU type of category that I've kind of just made up in this video. But I think that the caliber of the ATP that they're using in this shoe is much nicer than what I'm getting in the Aero Razor. While neither of these shoes is like max cushion, like cushy soft, I do enjoy the cushion of the Megablast a lot more. It's also given a different geometry, so it feels to me like there's more cushion in the forefoot. And then as I pick up the pace, the way that the foam compresses and then decompresses feels much more kind of controlled in the Megablast, whereas I feel like I'm bouncing on the foam in the Aero Razor. Not in a bad way, but it's not as soft and it doesn't feel as explosive on the decompression as what I'm getting in the Megablast. Now the Megablast is a lot heavier than the Aero Razor. It's 222 grams as it weighed on my scales versus the 198 of the Aero Razor. And that could be a problem for some people, especially when you're in the Aero Razor's wheelhouse. I think that this shoe is exceptionally good at when you're going fast, like threshold pace, VO2 max, or a 5K race pace. That's where I feel like the Aero Razor really shines. It can do long run stuff pretty well, but I think once you get into paces that are a little bit more relaxed, still faster than easy, but a little bit more relaxed than some of those faster paces, that's where I feel like then you're starting to get into Megablast's wheelhouse. So I would use these shoes slightly differently, but they're both really fun. And to me, exciting examples of the versatility of aliphatic TPU. So from like, I guess an academic or enthusiast perspective, really fascinating to see how these two shoes kind of stack up. Now, I think the most interesting difference between these two shoes is the price. The Megablast comes in at $225, which I've been saying is way too much for what this shoe offers, even though it is one of my favorite shoes that exists on the market. I would love this shoe closer to 200. If they could get it under 200, that would be phenomenal. So I do think that the Megablast is a bit overpriced, especially when you look at the 140 of the Aero Razor, which I think is substantially underpriced. So if you're looking at a shoe that can do a good job of being a speedy shoe and do a good job of being a long run shoe, I think the Aero Razor could be a really great choice at that $140 price point. But depending on exactly what kind of shoe you're looking for, if you're looking for that really nice long run shoe option or for a marathon racing option, I would go with the Megablast despite its expensive price at $225. So those are my thoughts on the Skechers Running Aero Razor, a very exciting update from the brand. Hopefully we can see more exciting updates from Skechers Running and that we will continue to see Skechers Running participating in performance run and in the running community in the future, because it does seem like they can make a good shoe when they want to. If you have any questions about this shoe or any of the other shoes that I talked about today, feel free to put them in the comments down below, or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all I have for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I'll see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?